Pledge allegiance, please. Roll call. Mark is gone. Otherwise, Sean, Bob, and Tim are here. Approval agenda for Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. We have any additions or deletions?
I would just make a note, we did have an item that was withdrawn last week, the conditional use permit for charter school at 2901 3rd Street South was withdrawn from the agenda, so it's not reflected on tonight's agenda. There may be a new application made at some point in the future to be determined. If that's the case, a new notice would be sent and a separate planning commission process would begin again.
Okay,
I'd move for approval of the agenda.
I'll second that motion.
we got a motion to approve. In a second, all in favor, saying aye.
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 Pass with all present. So the ordinance amendment.
Yep. Other two items are moving forward.
The Way Park Plan Commission will hold a public hearing at City Hall, 19 13th Avenue North, 6:30 PM or soon thereafter, Tuesday, May 10th, 2022, to hear the following request. Request of Command Central LLC and Paula Foley, St. Cloud Social, that'd be the wrong one.
That's the one that's been omitted. That's been omitted.
That's omitted. So we don't have a public hearing for the ordinance amendment?
There is a public hearing. There was not a, because it's an ordinance amendment, it's not a,
Written one?
it's not specific to a subject property. It was with the notice that was supplied to the St. Cloud Times. So there is a public hearing that was associated with it, but not the resident notice that you typically see.
Okay.
It's fine just to note that, there's a public hearing regarding.
Public hearing for B1 Limited Business District permitted uses. Public hearing opened at 6:33.
Planning commissioners, this is a request that's being driven by myself as city staff regarding a proposed amendment to the B1 Limited Business District standards of permitted uses. The intent with this is to modify the ordinance a little bit to allow for smaller multi-unit residential buildings as a permitted use. Currently, within the B1 district, which are not of a huge quantity in the city, primarily along 3rd Street and that area. Single-family dwellings are permitted use, and multi-unit buildings for residential purposes are allowed on the 2nd floor or above. The intent of the modification of this district would be to allow for some flexibility and potential infill redevelopment opportunities for smaller multi-unit buildings. My proposed number would be 16 units as standalone uses without requiring the commercial or office space component. The option for redevelopment to some of the properties in this area is smaller, low to medium density multi-unit residential units presents a little bit of a way to promote diversity of development as well as fulfill a segment of market demand for those kind of mid-tier housing options. If this were to move forward, the end result would be potential structures that are generally in line with the Crossroad lofts. I wrote Riverview lofts, but buildings are fairly similar. The Crossroad lofts building on 3rd Street North, but being fully built out as apartments or condominiums instead of having a required 1st floor retail office component. The current market for the smaller retail and office space is somewhat challenging, and having the requirement in place makes some of those projects a little less viable. The proposed changes would leave the requirements for incorporation of lower level non-residential uses in place for larger developments. As you can see on the screen here in your packet, the proposed amendment adds an additional permitted use where it reflects multiple family dwelling structures at net densities of no more than 24 units per developable acre and totaling not more than 16 units per structure. As I mentioned, 16 units could vary in size a little bit depending on the configuration of those units, depending on how many bedrooms they may have, but at 1 and 2 bedroom size, you would see something of the scale, probably like Crossroad Lofts or the Riverview Lofts, which was recently reviewed and is underway now. That seems to be a little bit of a sweet spot for development. So not a 100-unit megaplex, but kind of a little bit of middle ground for some rental options.
John, you mentioned Crossroads Lofts or whatever. That thing, as far as that was all residential, parking is a nightmare. I mean, it's like, because we did so many exceptions for it. 16 units, that's a lot of units. That only has like, what, 9? Or something like that?
It has, I believe, 9 units right now. There was interest in that if this were to go forward, I know that particular development would be interested in converting to additional units on the bottom floor, potentially 3 more units.
They'd have to do something for parking.
I haven't experienced any issues. I've not received any complaints regarding parking there. When I pass by, I've not seen that the parking lot has been, beyond capacity. I guess maybe you probably travel the road more than I do. You may see something different.
Well, right now it's all residents, so weekends and that, there's a lot of people there, but
With anything that would come forward, we would have to address parking. I had recommended approval of that particular project as a little bit of a test case, knowing that, parking may be tight there. We would probably look toward anything that would come down the road, so to speak, to have a higher parking count, reflecting, those sorts of uses more in line with the ordinance standard.
this is a public hearing. Anybody want to comment for or against, or? Commissioners?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second that.
We got a motion to close public hearing and a second. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Public hearing closed at 6:38.
Well, I'll say, my concern was about the parking. There's a lot of spots, but of course, they're going to be addressed as we go along in the permitting and the plating and et cetera.
Yeah, it would be case by case.
B1, 3rd Street, those are all smaller lots too, aren't they?
They tend to be smaller.
16 units, I think, is a lot, but
It doesn't necessarily mean that every one would be 16 units. It's just a top end, because what we see is it's potential that they may combine lots. To speak to Crossroad Lofts, that owner acquired the residential property behind that property. Now, with the intent that they could either use it for parking or potentially acquire additional lot somewhere down the line and use it for parking and building purposes and kind of reconfigure things. But that should take some of the pressure off in some way sometime down the road.
Yes, I question the idea of, it was kind of set up as a commercial area with lofts above and so on and so forth. I'm concerned about mixing multifamily dwellings in that kind of an atmosphere. I think that's the kind of thing we've been trying to avoid, that mix. I don't know if I am comfortable with putting that many apartments in that area. I don't know. And I'm not not sure what the impetus is for it, if it's, excuse me, if it's the fact that the area isn't developing fast enough and it's a different way of accomplishing development, but I think we're kind of circling around behind what we set out with the intent there, and I'm not sure that I'm real comfortable with that, but I don't know.
No, I appreciate the concern, and it's something that, you know, I've weighed as well. I guess I landed on the side that, would I want to promote a megaplex of, like a Prosper West type apartment there? No. But my thought was that, you know, where there may be opportunities for infill development as some properties may come online, I thought it was something that might be worthwhile. I don't expect that there would be a flood of applications to do this. You know, I think, you know, part of what I saw in there was that, you know, it allows for single-family dwellings as permitted uses. And that is partially, at least, to cover houses and homes that were already there.
Right.
To give them a little bit of coverage as they may buy and sell. But, you know, I think we have seen demand for those sorts of middle tier, you know, someone that comes into town, maybe isn't ready to put roots down and buy a house just yet, but doesn't want to live in a apartment that's 40, 50 units. They want something maybe a touch, you know, smaller, maybe a little more upscale, maybe that, you know, like a young professional sort of thing. That's the kind of market I was kind of anticipating with this sort of development.
Excuse me.
It's a little bit preemptive. The only one I know that would have interest in it right now would be the Crossroads Loft. We don't have people banging down the door looking to do this. This is something that's driven on my end to try and promote some options.
My thought was, when this whole area came up and was discussed, was that we're trying to transition that area from residential to commercial. And this seems to be moving away from that idea, and I'm not sure if that idea is less desirable now, and if we want to go to more of a residential entity again, or retain the residential feel. I don't know. I felt it was a transition away from residential to commercial for that particular corridor. And that's why I questioned this, but that's my feeling.
No, I understand. I fully appreciate the sentiments. I mean, if it's something, you know, that maybe there's a preference to put it on the back burner for the time being, because it is a staff request, so there's not a 60-day rule in effect. You know, we could subside it for the time being, maybe wait for the comprehensive plan process to play out a little bit. That this was something we anticipated discussing with that a little bit. Maybe revisit it at a future date once we can take a closer look.
When that B3 was set up, it was originally trying to get smaller shops, put the residential above it or whatever, so that could cross feed, like down by Shortstop, there's one where the apartments are all in the back and there's commercial in the front. Just smaller shops that, you know, small people can start off smaller and do something versus and just have it more of a walker-friendly neighborhood type situation of what the intent was when it first came about on the comprehensive plan back in 2005, I think it was.
But I think that was part of my intent, was that by having smaller, you know, limiting it to smaller structures, the idea would be to, you know, intersperse a little bit with some newer housing options that could potentially patronize some of those smaller businesses. We have had success with you know, conversion of some of those properties along 3rd Street over time, and it's not a, you know, 1 or 2 year time, it's decades time, going to more, you know, it's more of that corridor type use where you see those boutique type uses. I know that there's chiropractors and there's some salons popping up there. And this is something I had thought, my intent was that could be supportive of that and kind of mix and match. I didn't want it to be necessarily, now it's a run of apartments everywhere. The intent wasn't to displace any of those options, but to have something that could encourage it. I know that, you know, the market is maybe not where it was. It's shifting a little bit, so I'm trying to be a little bit proactive in responding to that. But I don't have an issue with, you know, essentially withdrawing this for the time being. You know, I'm basically the applicant. I can pull it for now and we can suss it out, maybe bring it back at a future time.
I wonder if with the comp plan being up for, you know, discussion upcoming, I wonder if we should maybe look at it in that context and maybe, you know, get a better feel for it. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Table it for now. Otherwise, my recommendation would be to deny it, but table it would work too.
The only thing is that, for tabling implies that there's gonna be a future meeting on it, and our timetable is to be
You
determined.
officially want to pull it then?
I think
That can be gone?
my intent would be as the applicant to essentially withdraw it for the time being, and we can bring it back at such time as maybe appropriate, you know, maybe a little more holistically with.
Personally, I would feel a little more comfortable with that, but, you know, I don't.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. I can consider this formally withdrawn by myself as city staff.
Thank you. Do we need to make a,
Pulled, so
if
we're
it's
done with
withdrawn,
it.
we don't have to make a,
No, you won't.
okay, okay.
No, I appreciate the input. I would much rather have that discussion than just say, yeah, go ahead. Because that's what you're here for, and you know, I value your honest opinions.
While we're on that, basically you've got one against and one middle of the road, and I'm actually for. So you know, I was okay with that. I like the fact that you are raising the ceiling but still allowing for those mid-range property developments. And it seems like we're talking about one corridor, but that's not all that's involved here. So,
No, and
need to
maybe
broaden
it
the
is better.
discussion.
Yeah, maybe it is better served as part of a larger discussion. I might be getting the cart in front of the horse a little bit.
Right.
What I've seen is, there's more of a movement among, planning professionals to visit what's kind of unofficially titled the missing middle, where you have buildings, you know, row homes, smaller units where you have 4, 6, 8, you know, 12, 16 maybe on the top end of those, versus that are put more dispersed through different areas of the city, rather than having larger sections where you have acres and acres of large apartment buildings. That those tend to fill a market that's somewhat gotten away from folks. There's a lot of good housing stock that of those, but it's getting a little older, and the tenants that are in those buildings, sometimes they're owners in condo cases, they tend to be long lasting. They tend to be really trouble free. They're a little more invested in those smaller buildings for some reasons. Especially for renter cases, for reasons that are not fully understood, but they, you know, for some of the larger complexes, they come with a lot of demands on the city for, you know, nuisance issues, maintenance type stuff, police calls. It's just kind of the nature of those larger buildings, especially when they get a little older. So this is looking just to kind of fill or encourage a little bit more diversity in that housing sector, but it perhaps is appropriate to discuss it, you know, in line with other housing options too, and, you know, revisit it at a future time.
I would say let's keep it on the stove, maybe move it to side burner for now. And, I mean, certainly keep it open for discussion because times change too, you know, and sometimes there's a need to look in different directions for what the current economy needs. So I would appreciate that.
That'll work.
Okay. Item 5, preliminary final plat. The Way Park Planning Commission will hold a meeting at City Hall, 1913th Avenue North, 6:30 is soon thereafter, Tuesday, May 10th, to hear the following request. Request of Bloomer Family Holdings LLC for the primary and final plat of West River Business Park 4. The property address is 320 Great Oaks Drive, City of Way Park, Stearns County, Minnesota. Public hearing opened up at 6:51.
I'll put the plat on screen here. This is the property at hand. The former POS print building, right on Third Street there. Oops, there we go. This request was submitted by the property owner, for review and preliminary and final plat of West River Business Park 4. This, property is currently occupied by two structures. On the eastern side is a former POS print building, and on the western side is a secondary smaller building, adjacent to Great Oak Drive. Property is being platted ahead of a potential sale and reuse of the, former POS building in order to split the parcel, and configure it with separate buildings. We did discuss the option of an administrative lot split with the representatives of the property, but it was determined that platting of the property would be preferable. If anything would be done, an expansion or a new building at any point, the platting would be required and triggered at that time. We could administratively split the lot, but at some point the trigger would kick in to have to plat it anyway, so it probably makes sense to do it and be done with it. Access for the new parcel on the western side will be maintained through an easement through the POS building property, but the intent would be to have an eventual access via Great Oak Drive, and there's no reason that wouldn't work. Both parcels meet the size and frontage requirements of the underlying I-1 light industrial district. The plat has been provided to Stearns County for review and comment due to 3rd Street North being County Road. We would incorporate any comments or conditions ahead of the review by the City Council. This property has not been previously platted, so there would be the payment in lieu of parkland dedication required. Staff will be preparing a memo and recommendation to the Park Board for their review and forwarding of that recommendation to the City Council. It's not under the Planning Commission's purview, but based on the ordinance requirement of 5% of the land value, the proposed payment would be $9,800. I would add, it was brought to my attention that there's a small encroachment, very, very minor, into the city right-of-way in the northeast component of the property. There's a small shed building. Staff, the city does not have an issue with that. We run into that once in a while. We'll be preparing a memo for the owners that basically acknowledges that we're aware of it. Don't make it bigger, but we're not going to force you to remove it. It doesn't pose an issue for us, but don't make it bigger, and if it comes out of there, it can't be replaced.
Grandfathered in.
Yep, minor issue. It's a couple feet. So that doesn't pose an issue for us. We'll be providing that to the owner. Just wanted to make a note of it because it is visible on the plat there. I'm supportive of the preliminary final plat. As this request does have the public hearing component, you can open that up, but I would recommend approval of the preliminary plat with the following condition. Just that they're subject to the requirement of payment in lieu of parkland dedication as recommended by Park Board and established by the City Council, and that any required parkland dedication fees must be paid prior to affixing of city signatures upon the plat. Provided that condition is satisfied, I would recommend approval of the final plat as well.
Public have anything to come up and speak for, or? Motion to close public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing.
I'll second that motion.
We got a motion and a second to close public hearing. All in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Public hearing closed at 6:55.
The first question, John, is do a commercial entity being split into two commercial entities, why are we doing parkland fees?
The parkland dedication fees are assessed every time a property is platted the first time, it's only assessed that first time. And it's not done for subsequent replattings or future actions. Those parkland fees are utilized, and I'm getting a little bit outside my area here. Those are for acquisition of new park areas, and I believe that they can also be utilized for maintenance and uses for existing park areas. Now, the option also exists for parkland dedication in the form of land for appropriate type developments, but typically the fee is assessed in lieu of that, because otherwise we end up with very scattered little parcels.
Realize that, but isn't that based on residential properties?
Sorry?
Isn't parkland dedication fees based on residential properties?
There's different amounts that are for residential properties. There's for the amount for industrial and commercial properties is 5% of the established value of the land. The land itself, no buildings are included with that. For residential buildings, it's based on a per lot or per unit basis for per lot for single family dwellings and per unit for multi-unit developments.
I guess I would like to pursue that elsewhere than here, but that's wrong. Why does a commercial entity need to pay parkland fees? They have no use of parkland. A residential property would have, or apartment property would have a need for accessing parkland. But commercial and industrial uses, I don't understand that concept at all.
Well, that's what's established in the fee schedule for the ordinance, and I don't go by anything but what the ordinance says for that.
Yes.
And it's not a function of it's not technically under the purview of the planning commission. It's under the park board.
I know, I realize that, but I'm just,
Mandated fee?
I am sorry, I don't know if it's a state mandated fee or
I
not.
think you can't get out of that anyway.
I know there's been some discussion at the legislature of trying to modify or codify that.
okay, well, that's not for discussion here, I guess it's if it's in the ordinance. But I think that discussion might have to come up somewhere else. Oh, good.
Agree 100% with you. I don't think that the city of the city of Waite Park is following the state statute. State statute related to parkland dedication specifically says that the amount of the fee, if it is cash in lieu of land, there has to be some type of rough proportionality between the fee and the need created by that development, which commercial, industrial developments, they don't create a need for parklands, period. So I brought this conversation up with the city attorney some time ago when we did Molitor's, replatted Molitor's plat, and he basically moved a property line 70 feet, and he had to pay $14,000 in parkland dedication fee. It makes no sense. So I do think that the city needs to relook at it, whether it's in their ordinance or their what rules it's in. I don't think they're following the state statute.
Okay.
So,
I think it will be looked at.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Due to this, as far as parkland, that's gotta get decided down the road, it's not us.
No, it's established here, but that's not to be decided here, no. No. It's yea or nay with the conditions presented. And I guess I don't see any problem with the split and so on and so forth and the plat, so I guess I would be in favor of the approval of the preliminary and final plat with the conditions that have been established.
I will second that motion.
We got a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Pass with all present.
Thank you.
John, is there any new business or
I don't have anything additional tonight, no.
Well then,
for adjourn? Motion for adjourn?
oh yes, I move we adjourn.
I will second that motion.
We got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, signal saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 7:01. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You.
You.